Story 1. AI will become as common as smartphones, but debates over its ethical use will explode. Climate technology will boom, with massive innovations in clean energy and water conservation. Social media will fragment, and people will shift to smaller, niche communities instead of giant platforms. Fashion will go full retro, with 2030 style pulling heavily from the 2000s. Space tourism will be less science fiction and more like a rich people's vacation. By the end of the decade, nostalgia for the calm 2010s will kick in hard, ironically ignoring how chaotic those years actually were. Story 2. Elon Musk is criminally convicted of a crime. China will still not have invaded Taiwan. Putin loses power in Russia. Another country will vote on leaving the European Union. There will be a major terrorist attack in a Western country involving drones with bombs, similar to what we see in Ukraine. Israel will still have troops in Gaza. A 2008 level of recession kicks in around 2028 to 2029. Story 3. By 2029, we will look back and realize this decade was the turning point where artificial intelligence, climate action, and space exploration completely reshaped society. Oh, and by then, everyone will ironically be wearing skinny jeans again and pretending they hated the 2020s while secretly missing them. Story 4. Climate change will cause more extreme weather incidents. Politicians will do nothing about the long-term effects because they only think about the next election. Story 5. Dead internet will become true. It has already started with Meta's artificial intelligence profiles. The internet is going to be full of bots interacting with each other. Handmade art will become a niche hobby and will return to mostly traditional. Digital art will become obsolete and taken over by artificial intelligence. Story 6. Things are so messed up right now that I cannot even guess. The trajectory and extremity of the current issues are so chaotic and unprecedented that I would accept anything from not much happens. The planet is destroyed, we cure aging, artificial intelligence becomes our god, we cure all disease, and we join the Galactic Federation. Story 7. It's downhill from here as climate change becomes climate disruptions. Totalitarian regimes will continue to grow and democracies decline as people listen to propaganda more and more because the truth gets worse and worse. We could be heading to a Star Trek-style future, but we will get a Mad Max future because we as a species won't tell billionaires to leave. Story 8. Much like how the 2010s were just a 50-year echo of progressive ideals showing up, kind of working, and some people being mad about it from the 1960s, the 2020s will continue to be a 50-year echo of the people being mad about the 60s, instead being mad about the 2010s and constructing a backlash against them. Story 9. Well, for at least the next 4 years, we can expect the rich to get richer and more powerful while generational poverty grows exponentially. Governmental corruption and incompetence will reach all-time highs, and they will get away with it. Americans will continue to vote against their own best interests. Worldwide environmental health will decline, and climate-driven disasters will increase. Palestine and Israel will continue the same conflicts they have had since the beginning. Equal and civil rights will be dismissed here in the United States. If you are a woman, part of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, a minority, or financially or physically challenged, the uphill battle will continue. We will experience some form of ongoing inflation or stagnation, and supporters of Make America Great Again will blame it on the 4 years President Biden was in office. Food prices will rise significantly. Corporate investments in real estate will increase, and housing insecurities and homelessness will grow. Our gross national product index will decline while our national debt increases. I can think of so many more, but this is enough for now. Story 10. Breakthrough in biotechnology. China and United States on edge over Taiwan. African countries further develop. Generation, whichever is next, stands for humane values and opposes corruption. Corruption exposed in most Western countries. Story 11. At least one completely insane and horrible thing will happen in the next 4 years with Trump as president, and he will escape any accountability and blame for it. Story 12. AI bots. Increasing misinformation online, a growing inability to differentiate between fact and fiction, and the polarization of media platforms will lead to increased mistrust in the internet and the media. People will start cutting the cord and detach from digital life in frustration. It will eventually snowball into popularity at some point further down, but the 2020s will be cited as the catalyst. Story 13. Doom and gloom in these comments, so I'll list a few positive predictions here. Thorium reactor begins construction in the European Union and United States. Prosthetics utilize artificial intelligence, improving dexterity. Indie web movement expands. Several European Union countries phase out coal power. One or more major United States cities experiment with car-free infrastructure. Gateway lunar space station established and crewed around the moon. Story 14. The Trump presidency and the Republican Party, given that neither is designed to govern, will oversee at least one gigantic failure involving their utter mismanagement with disastrous results. I'd base this prediction on Republicans' rule so far in the 21st century, from the Iraq War to COVID-19 to Hurricane Katrina, to the mistreatment of children at the border to September 11th and so on. It's a long list, but due to media on television being either billionaire-funded, explicitly right-wing, or presenting both sides as equally bad, and the fact that well-funded right-wing propaganda dominates both AM radio and the internet, Republicans still get elected to cut taxes for wealthy individuals, deregulate industry, and make life worse for everyone except the rich. Nothing will be done about it. People will keep falling for it. Story 15. By 2030, a prominent figure or world leader will be assassinated by a drone. Not a military predator, but a homebrew DJI type. Also, by 2030, you will be able to use artificial intelligence to insert yourself into your favorite show. For example, rewriting Game of Thrones Season 8 and including your friends as characters. Story 16. We have seen one particular group attempt to burn our country to the ground and help elect the most vile, vicious, inept, greedy bastard as President of the United States. They probably think that they have gotten away clean. Couple more weeks and he will be gone. 1 week later, he will be forgotten. The week after that, he will be whacked by his wife, his son, his brother, or his staff, just to shut him up and keep him from testifying. Story 17. Kanzik becomes a much more serious idea in the four countries. Secession movements become more popular in an increasingly divided United States. Astronauts return to the moon. Kanzik nations and the European Union move closer together as allies and become more distant from the United States. Somaliland becomes a country. Story 18. I still do not have flying cars, laser pistols, railgun rifles, travel to Saturn or Jupiter, sex change with just a pill, and ecological utopia based on fusion reactors. So you people need to correct that. Story 19. The market for United States treasuries will dry up around 2029 or 2030. The liquidity of the assets will be in question due to the United States' inability to pay the debt service. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will be cut drastically due to increased debt service and bond rates being much higher due to creditworthiness completely tanking, causing a big cut into the federal budget. Non-discretionary spending, which is the majority of the budget, will need to be addressed, not just shutting the government down to argue over only a small portion of the budget. Story 20. I'll focus on what's important to me personally. Vladimir Putin will not make it to 2030. His downfall will be triggered by some completely random event that no one will see coming but will make perfect sense in retrospect. Once the trigger event happens, Putin's end will be so rapid that major world powers will not be able to react or make a plan on what to do next. The first initiative of whoever ends up in charge in the first hours and days will be to end active fighting in Ukraine, assuming it's still ongoing by then, and move to negotiate. The power vacuum he leaves behind, as well as his systemic efforts to snuff out any threats to his power, will leave no one singularly capable of assuming the same kind of absolute authority, forcing the elites to negotiate and compromise. This will result in an election which won't be free and fair but will be competitive, as in the result won't be predetermined. Whoever comes out on top will move to normalize relations with the West. Ukraine will get back, via concession, most of the territory they lost in the war but will probably have to agree to a free, independently observed referendum on the status of Crimea, likely ceding it to Russia officially as a result of it. This is the most level-headed, reasonable take I can muster. Obviously, the range of possibilities is practically infinite. Story 21. Even though it sometimes feels as if it's not going to be okay, it is. This isn't said to dismiss the feeling of insecurity. It's okay to be worried and skeptical, But still, I pinky promise, it will all be okay. Story 22. Seeing how exponentially we have grown, it's terrifying where we are headed. One existential crisis for human beings is my take. Be it through wars, artificial intelligence advancement, politics, terrorism, or aliens, because why not? They may have had enough of us. We've had enough of us. Story 23. Elon Musk will own all major internet platforms and apps. JD. Vance will go against Trump and write another book about it. Artificial intelligence will now write most of our books and news unbeknownst to us. All streaming platforms will have a basic level, a paid premium, and an extra payment premium plus. Story 24. In the second half of the 2020s, I think we will see an increased focus on sustainability and renewable energy. In addition, technology will continue to advance at an impressive pace, with artificial intelligence and augmented reality changing the way we work and entertain ourselves. Story 25. I'm always amazed by the fact that our entire view of the 1960s was formed in the summer of 1969. Basically, an entire movement and generation was defined in, say, 5 months from the moon landing and the Stonewall Uprising to Woodstock. Basically, we have no idea how history is going to view the 2020s until a couple of decades after it is over. Story 26. War with China and Russia. Alien intervention and exposure of government knowledge. A golden age of understanding and elimination of separation, or what I wish. Story 27. The ones who are kids will become teenagers, and they will be kind and feel free to be different from one another. Each one will have a different style. The Eastern influence on Western culture will create a new type of Brazilian funk. Climate change will elevate 4 degrees Celsius. We will start thinking about other architectural techniques to make places have a comfortable temperature on the inside. There will be water stations around the cities to combat death from dehydration. Story 28. No manned landings on the moon. No samples of ice or water from polar moon craters returned to Earth. No manned landings on Mars. No manned starships out of low Earth orbit. No starships, even empty ones, going to Mars. Mars soil samples are still on Mars with no plans to retrieve them. Still no tested designs for landing gear for moon missions. The International Space Station falls and burns up with no replacement under construction. No de cinematic universe. Story 29. Optical processors solve the remaining issue with quantum computing, drastically reducing power consumption and opening the door for sentient artificial intelligence, as the technological cost of manufacturing huge computers comes down significantly, although that will take a full decade. Meanwhile, we realize that while we cannot make the trip to other stars because of radiation and time, artificial intelligence can. So we develop a space probe that can travel at almost relativistic speeds just below the speed of light due to them being unaffected by G-force, to scan neighboring systems and relay information about planets. They will need power, however, so we add diamond batteries and solid-state batteries that can charge almost instantaneously when passing by another sun, capable of surviving extreme cold and zero charge for thousands of years. Even if fully discharged, they will become active again as soon as they reach a light source. Back on Earth, they have also been installed into robots, and China will use them to attack Taiwan to secure further access to chip manufacturers. Other nations will be too afraid to intervene, and they will become the dominant superpower unless, of course, we are in another timeline where a world war ensues over access to production of chipsets. Nanorobotics make it to consumer-grade technology, and suddenly we're seeing treatments in hospitals for things like diabetes, while more complex ailments like cancer continue for another decade or so until we perfect the smaller nanorobotics and their ability to repair deoxyribonucleic acid. Then, finally, by 2042, we can follow that probe to Alpha Centauri because we now effectively have radiation protection and also discovered anti-inertia properties, which will allow us to move without feeling any acceleration. Most of it will not be public knowledge, however. As always, governments and corporations conceal the most significant advances, and they will not want to tell the public until it is a success, roughly in 2087. Story 30. We will have another flu pandemic before 2030 once the H5N1 virus successfully mutates to transmit easily between humans in the next year. We have the means to mitigate much of the worst effects, but that will be hindered by misinformation and disinformation on vaccinations and treatments. as well as a lack of implementation by governments of lessons learned from the COVID-19 response. Story 31. The big earthquake on the West Coast is going to rip, and part of Seattle is going to fall into the Sound. Except the Space Needle. I read somewhere that the Space Needle was designed by a team that did such a good job that the Space Needle withstood the earthquake simulator while all the other masonry and glass buildings crumbled. I cannot remember the paper I read that in. It is highly doubtful to happen, but gosh, it would be an insane experience to feel the Earth's might beneath your feet. Story 32. As environmental disasters increase, there will be widespread backlash against the environmental impacts of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. However, it likely will not lead us to change anything.